So at this time, 2 minutes to 9, we will reconvene for the next item on the agenda. And my paperwork, I don't have the fancy computer here like you guys, but I believe it's item 11. Staff, help me out.
That is true. Item 11, the local coastal land use plan and implementation plan amendment. And I'm hoping this is Kayo's item.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
So our Deputy City Attorney,
Kayo, would you introduce yourself? Welcome.
Sure.
Good seeing you at a higher capacity here at Council and not Planning Commission, correct?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Kayo Ariano. I'm a Deputy City Attorney. As Laura mentioned, agenda item 11 is an ordinance amending 2 of the maps contained in the city's local coastal program, or LCP. This amendment is in accordance with the terms of the settlement agreement in the Benjamin versus City of Half Moon Bay lawsuit. Pursuant to that settlement, the city agreed.
Kyle, I'm sorry, could I ask you to move closer to your mic? Or just pull it closer toward you, something.
How's that?
May I ask the speaker to step down for the moment until we get ready, please? Thank you.
So in that settlement, the city agreed to use its best efforts to amend its LCP to designate 2 parcels of land, the Sewer Authority Mid-Coastside parcel, more commonly known as the Landstrip parcel just south of the Kehoe Ditch, and the Caltrans mitigation site as sensitive habitat areas on 2 maps, the Habitat Areas and Water Resources Overlay Map and the Coastal Resources Areas Map. As the council may recall, it initiated this amendment by resolution of intention back on August 20th of last year. The amendment went before the Planning Commission last month, December 10th, and the Planning Commission adopted the resolution recommending the LCP amendment before you tonight. Just to briefly recap that meeting, in response to public comment and questions from the Commission, one thing the staff did want to clarify was that the maps will not result in any changes in how the city's development regulations are applied, since the city's LCP already requires the city to apply special development regulations to properties within sensitive resource areas, regardless of whether they're shown on the maps. And as a final note, the council should have before it correspondence received earlier today from Mr. James Benjamin, which, among other things, expressed concern about the quality of the maps submitted as exhibits to the ordinance. Specifically, he requested clarification that the amendments before the council tonight are being, quote, added to, that the areas, being added to the maps are, quote, being added to the maps but do not replace the existing LCP habitat area and water resources overlay and coastal resources area map. So to clarify, the map amendments before you tonight are intended to amend the existing maps by adding these 2 parcels, the Landstrip parcel and the Caltrans mitigation site. Finally, because this amendment is subject to certification by the Coastal Commission upon adoption of the ordinance and certification by the Coastal Commission, staff does intend to prepare cleaner maps delineating the Landstrip parcel and the Caltrans mitigation site on the 2 maps. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Yeah, I'd like to ask either you or the city attorney just a procedural question before I open the staff. Do we have a deadline when additional material is distributed to the council? I'm not comfortable with receiving something when I sit down. And it's been my experience that normally at the regional board, we do not accept any material after a certain period. And I don't know if the city has something like that, and I'm not requesting that at the moment. I'm just curious because it's hard to kind of try to shuffle everything and give it an honest look through and see regarding the comments.
I think it's a great comment, and it is correct that receiving additional correspondence at 4 o'clock in the afternoon of the day of the meeting makes it difficult to prepare a detailed response to that item, but we don't have any restrictions under that, and there are none per se under the Brown Act. I've heard some agencies have adopted procedural rules to limit that, but it's not very common.
Yeah, and the reason is I'd like to definitely give it a fair reading, prior to getting here with over 800 or 1,000 pages that we kind of tried to read this weekend in between coughing and everything. So at this time, I'll open the public hearing, and my first speaker will be James Benjamin, please.
Thank you, and sorry to jump the gun, Mayor. Still James Benjamin, 400 Pilarcitos Avenue, notwithstanding the blistering comments from the last item. I want to express my concerns on a couple of points that maybe I can just walk through in the letter, which begins with a fidelity to the settlement agreement we had, which called for an amendment that these areas were habitats that contain or support listed species. And somehow, in the process of introducing the amendment, as I have discussed in earlier letters, so this is not new, the word likely appeared, that it was likely to, these areas were likely to contain or support. And that is not consistent with our agreement. I think a careful reading of the agreement will confirm that. Second, the concern with the adequacy of the maps wasn't just the question of addition versus replacement of those maps. It was that when you look at Exhibit B, the references to the Caltrans mitigation wetland does not appear. And at the Planning Commission, this item was raised. Planning Director Ombo pointed out that the bedspread version of the map would show it and not to worry. And in my letter, I suggested that I hoped that that map would appear so that we could view it and know what was being transmitted to the Coastal Commission for certification. I should say that I support the amendment. Then I had a chance to look at the map earlier this evening with the planning director was good enough to give it to me, and it actually doesn't show any of the areas. So I remain concerned that the exhibits, any exhibit that you have to act on tonight, needs to show the areas that are referenced. There's a nice mention of it in Mr. Kandati's report, where he has a map at the top of page 3, I think it is, that lays those out. But that's not the map that's referenced in the resolution. And then the underlying issue here is what constitutes a resource. It's not the frogs or the snakes, it's the habitat that supports them. That's what the resource is. And it's difficult to describe the land as likely to be the land that you're describing. It is the land that you're describing. Those are the core elements of my letter. And in the interest of brevity, I'll stop there. Thank you for the opportunity to address you again. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Well, our next speaker, Patrick Johnson, comes forward. City Attorney, when it comes time back to staff, I'll have you respond to those comments for me, please, and for us.
Patrick Johnson, 431 Kehoe, speaking as a resident, long-term resident on Kehoe. This item that you're seeing now is something that I've recused myself on all and anything that has to do with Kehoe or the ditch. I want to be clear, I've always been spoken and as a resident. That's how it's been. These maps that are going to be coming forward to you and delineating and showing the Kehoe ditch and also our properties is something that I brought up 10 years ago also. If you probably remember those photos that I showed you of Amy Yates in my house and a couple other people's homes, as you go further down towards Jimmy's house, they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And you've got the 50-foot drip line buffer lines. Those buffer lines, as you remember in those photos, went all the way to our driveways where my vehicles parked or people's cars. So you're going to have these habitat zones that are being shown all the way out halfway into people's homes, in their bathrooms, in their kitchens. And that's basically going to do a lot of, you have to get workshops done before you can do any construction. You have to make sure that biological assessment's done, which is really expensive. To trim, you heard some stories, just to trim your trees, you can't do. It becomes a major, major stopping point for anything if you want to maintain your home. Legally, you can go over the edge and just say you really can't even mow your lawn because that's motorized. So I know I'm going a little overboard, but I just want to point that out. These are all things that Mr. Benjamin, my neighbor, has brought forward in this litigation and has really made everybody out there very frustrated. I want you to know, to answer your question, Marina, and you don't need to respond, I'm not asking for anybody to respond. Yes, we've drilled and we've drilled. And when we say that, I've got a book this big on all the stuff. Everybody's been educated. We've tried to work with Jimmy. We've had him at Paulette and Walter's homes. We've tried to, what Mr. Alifano has said, you know, in his meetings, what is it that you want so we can just sign you off? We're doing that ourselves. I want to be clear with you guys on our end.
Yeah.
I'm just saying what we're trying to do.
Excuse me, Mr. Johnson. Yeah, just make your comments about the applicant and not personal names,
Okay.
please.
I think I'm just going to pull back. I'm frustrated, and I'm going to pull back. As frustrated as everybody is here on this side, I'm as equally frustrated, and so are my neighbors. And I think from this point on, I will not comment any more on this subject. I'm just going to pull away. I'm going to live at my house. You'll never see me at the mic again, because this is just getting really old, and how my property rights are being taken away slowly, slowly, slowly. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, and thank you for your dedication to this issue. Next, I will go to Mr. Damon, I believe it is. Yes.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Reto Stam, and I live at 423 Kehoe Street. I bought a house like 2 years ago, and I lived there with my mom. And we just would like to live there and, you know, kind of garden a little bit and just be there. And that's pretty much all we're asking for, and hopefully have no flooding in the backyard. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you for your concerns. I have no further cards, so I will close the public hearing, but there's a couple of quick ones with our city attorney that I think is comments were very concerning. I was under the impression that this was nothing new, and there's really no land use, what's the word I'm looking for? It's no LCP issues in this new map. Is that correct? Help me out there. I'm a little fuzzy on tonight.
Yes, that is correct. The buffers and the restrictions that are being referred to are the result of the Kehoe ditch being described as a riparian corridor, and the adjacent areas being described as likely to contain or support sensitive resources or sensitive habitats. Under the city's local coastal program, the fact that those features are there gives rise to the buffer zone restrictions. So adopting this map will not increase the level of regulation that goes on with the adjacent property owners right now. The fact that the Kehoe ditch has been identified in this litigation as sensitive habitat area makes it more certain that it's considered as such. I'd like to address Mr. Benjamin's comments about the fact that it's described in the reports as likely containing red-legged frogs or California or San Francisco garter snakes. The evidence that was presented in the litigation and all the biological studies that have been done out there have indicated that the Kehoe ditch likely constitutes habitat for California red-legged frogs, not suitable breeding habitat, except a few very small pocket areas, perhaps, but not likely, but would constitute foraging habitat or dispersal habitat. And since there have been California red-legged frogs documented at the Caltrans mitigation site, it's within the dispersal range of California red-legged frogs. So that's the basis for that. In the litigation, the court looked at those reports which concluded that the ditch likely constitutes habitat and made the conclusion that it does in fact constitute red-legged frog habitat. So that's a new issue that came up in the litigation. As a result of that, and as a result of the settlement agreement, the maps will identify the land strip parcel, the Caltrans mitigation site, and the Kehoe ditch as sensitive resource areas. So the fact that it's described as such in the report is merely an accurate a description of the biological studies that have been done out there. But it will be identified as sensitive resource areas in the maps that are submitted to the Coastal Commission, which frankly need to be prepared. And the reason they're not before you tonight is that, as Mr. Benjamin's correspondence points out, the settlement agreement required the city to amend those maps, the habitat and water resources overlay maps and the sensitive resource, the coastal resources area maps, but staff has not been able to locate a coastal resources area map to amend. So this, as far as we know, is the first addition of a coastal resource area. So we're going to have to create the map, and that has not been done yet. One will be prepared with suitable detail to submit to the Coastal Commission when this is ready to send for certification. Happy to answer any other questions or comments.
Thank you. Yeah, and we all deeply appreciate your expertise in these issues. My other one on the second commenter mentioned, I'm just, again, you talk about worry. I agonize over how do we share with our neighbors in the community about they're not going to be able to mow their lawns, they're not going to be able to garden. I mean, this is just hopefully hyperbole and just crazy comments, because unless it's legally true.
I think that what would be in order, it would be to send correspondence to the neighbors outlining specifically what the LCP regulations permit and don't permit. And with regard to existing improved landscape features, I think there might be a little bit more flexibility than what might be supposed. So we can take a more careful look at that. And I think, suggesting that the staff correspond with the neighbors to just explain to them what that means in terms of whether or not they can go out and mow their backyard lawns, or rather have to pull the grass by hand. I think, that's a great suggestion.
But seriously, they can mow their lawns?
Yes, in my opinion,
Okay.
they can.
I mean, you understand how serious we take all these issues, and all the commenters. I mean, this is, again, as the Vice Mayor stated earlier, we're trying to do everything right. And it's very emotional, very passionate. I'm sorry the second commenter had such feelings on this, and I can understand his frustration, but you still have to step up and move forward and try to work with the community to do what's best for your neighborhood. So I would hope he would understand it. I'm sorry he left. But council members' comments on this, please?
Could I just interject one more comment if I could? I know that they didn't speak to this item, but two of the neighbors who, I think it was Christine and Lori Bolanos, who, the residents at 403 Kehoe Avenue, and described the significant problem they have with the eucalyptus tree. I don't know if they've come in to speak to staff about that and discuss the process for obtaining a tree removal permit. I do know that the eucalyptus tree is not designated as a heritage tree under city ordinance, so that wouldn't be an obstacle to them. But there are some significant issues that would have to be dealt with in order to remove that tree. I would encourage them to come in and speak to staff to delineate exactly what is required should they decide to go that route.
Thank you. And I think, we have to work closely with our resident. I did close the public hearing. Thank you for the guidance there. But we do have to work with all parties to ensure, and those ukes are big there. I see them every day also. And we all have these ukes that are taking over the coast side too. So, okay, yes. Any other further comments from City Council? Understand what staff has presented and what the public has commented on?
With all of that, I'd make a motion to introduce an ordinance amending the city's local coastal program, LCP, land use plan and implementation plan by revising the habitat areas and water resources overlay map and coastal resources areas map to reflect areas in the city found likely to contain sensitive coastal resources in the UR, Urban Reserve Zone District.
I'll second.
It's been moved and second. Any further discussion, comments? Otherwise, roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, so ordered, 5-0. We will move on to item 12, I believe. And this, again, is a staff and public hearing and some comments. And I kind of have the feeling it's already been done, but we need to kind of revisit it. So we will let staff make a brief presentation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. As you indicated, the Council previously acted on this in 2011. This is a corrective ordinance amendment, and it was inadvertently overlooked, and we're bringing it back for you to reintroduce. So again, the Planning Commission and the Council has previously acted on this, and it inadvertently was overlooked. So we're recommending that we delete the condition of proportionality from the zoning ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll open the public hearing, and it looks like we have no commenters, so we will close the public hearing. And at this time, bring it back to council for any questions or comments.
Since we've already approved this, if there's no objection, I'd like to make a motion to introduce the ordinance amending Title 18 zoning of the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code to amend Chapter 18.02 definitions at Section 18.02.040 to delete the definition of proportionality rule and direct staff to file a notice. I'm still a little shaky here. Notice of exemption from SEQA for the proposed amendment.
I'll second.
Moved and second. Any further discussion or comments? Otherwise, roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, and banging on the gavel again. We got another public hearing quickly here, but staff's presentation, please, and City Attorney Kandati.
Yes, thank you. Under the current municipal code, the designated city parks are closed at 9 p.m. and open at sunrise. And this ordinance that's before you this evening is to amend the code to add Oak Avenue Park to the list of parks identified in the Muni Code as being subject to that restriction. It comes at the request of the Sheriff's Department, and it really has to do with problems of loitering and litter and some gang issues that have been identified at that park. Right now, the police department can't contact individuals that are there unless they're actually witnessing some enforcement issue that they need to address. Once this ordinance is in effect, when they see someone hanging out in the park after 9 p.m., they can ask them to leave or be cited. So that's the purpose of this ordinance. Recommended introduction this evening.
Thank you. So we will again open public hearing, and I see no commenters. We will close the public hearing. You guys are put me into this first meeting in fire with public hearings here tonight. So yes, so back to council.
I have a question for the attorney. Mr. Kandati, on the ordinance, do we have to list all of our parks, or can we just say city parks? I mean, it would seem like every time we add a park, we have to come back and amend this ordinance. Is there any way to do this so that we say city parks?
We could do that, and that question was brought to my attention this afternoon. You know, quite frankly, it just didn't occur to me. But my recommendation would be that you go ahead and introduce this ordinance, and when we do our cleanup ordinance coming up in a couple of months, I'd be happy to throw that in there as a common sense cleanup item. And thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Very good. Any other questions or comments on this? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion, please.
I would introduce the ordinance amending Chapter 9.13 Park Regulations of Title 9 Public Peace, Morals, and Welfare of the Half Moon Bay Municipal Code to include Oak Avenue Park.
Second.
Moved in second. If not any further discussion, we will go for another roll call vote, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, so ordered, and I think we're done with public hearing, correct? So we'll move on to the Granada. And Alex, thanks for hanging in there. We keep this meeting going. Your wife will have a baby by the time we finish this thing.
I guess I'm the official closer for tonight's evening.
The closer. You could handle it too, Guy.
All right, well, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the
Make
council.
it short. Go home and see your wife in the future.
All right, there we go. The item before you this evening is the Parks and Recreation funding agreement with the Granada Sanitary District. I'm going to shorten it as GSD. At the October 15, 2013 City Council meeting, the City Council heard a presentation by GSD's General Manager, Chuck Duffy, regarding the district's local agency formation commission, LAFCO, application to reorganize into a community service district. By reorganizing into a community services district, GSD will be able to provide parks and recreation services to the portion of the current service area not located within the city of Half Moon Bay. The City Council at its November 19th meeting approved a letter with conditions to LAFCO. One of those conditions was to establish a pass-through funding agreement between the district and the City of Half Moon Bay that would ensure a proportional share of property tax currently allocated to GSD for parcels within Half Moon Bay. There are 743 total parcels in the overlap area. So basically those parcels in the overlap area, the assessed value of those parcels will be pitted against the total assessed value of the Granada Sanitary District. Currently, the assessed value of the overlap area is 18.2% of the total assessed value for the entire sanitary district. At the January 15th LAFCO hearing, Commission members approved Granada Sanitary District's application to reorganize into a community service district to provide parks and recreation. And the one condition that they need to meet for final approval and recording of the Commission's approval is this agreement that's before you this evening. Ultimately, the final step for GSD has to complete in order to reorganize into a community service district is what Councilmember Alifano mentioned earlier, an election at the June 6th primary to basically ask the voters and the residents of GSD whether or not they want to reorganize into a community service district. Attached to the staff report is the proposed funding pass-through agreement that is based on the total percentage of county assessed value in the overlap area, which currently, like I said, it was 18.2%. Therefore, whatever GSD budgets annually for parks and recreation, they don't have a set value of what they're going to budget, but it can change on an annual basis. So we'll get 18.2% of the pie, and that's what's projected for this current fiscal year. So annually, it'll be reallocated depending on what type of new development or the selling of properties, reassess values, and our number of 18.2% could increase or it could decrease compared to the whole pie of the Granada Sanitary District. Another noteworthy item that's within the agreement is that currently there is nothing official in writing with the Granada Sanitary District and the overlap area to speak or to have in writing that we provide garbage service currently for that overlap area. So this agreement in itself, it states that the City of Half Moon Bay provides parks and recreation and trash services for that overlap area. So this is kind of the first time that we have it in writing. So that's the other noteworthy item. So this concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions. The total amount that's projected is about $37,000. That's that 18.2% of the total assessed value that would be passed through to the City of Half Moon Bay. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex, for that presentation. I didn't mean to make light of this very serious situation, and I'm glad we're going to be able to clarify our franchise with our carrier here in the City of Half Moon Bay to make sure it's in writing, so I appreciate that. So does anyone have any questions of Alex at this time? And I think one of the things, with the attorneys here, we as a city will not take a position on the June ballot issue. We as individuals could possibly, I guess, even if you don't live in the district.
That's right.
It's best probably to stay out of it.
That's right, and I
Thank
suppose
you.
there's nothing that would prevent the City Council from taking an official position on the on the proposal as well.
Except common sense.
Yeah, we'll just
I
move
should
forward
say,
with this letter.
Probably no legal restriction on your doing so, but that's right.
Thank you. All right, any motion or
Comment.
comment?
Comment and a question for Councilmember Alfano. So my understanding is that if this is not approved, then this item does not go to the ballot. Is that correct? Thank you. And then I would like to understand, Alan, your specific rationale for being the low man on the vote when this came before LAFCO.
Well, as I mentioned in the December meeting, I didn't see enough information to make me feel comfortable, and I felt by trying to push for the June ballot, it was just going too quickly. So I voted against it, 6-1. And I have to tell you, obviously the other LAFCO members see this as a positive step to put Parks and Rec control down at a local level, and I'm fine with that. I do feel there's been a lack of specificity in okay, what are you going to accomplish? Are you going to go buy a piece of property? Are you going to put slides, a seesaw? What are you going to do? And I still haven't seen that kind of detail. But the bottom line is they've really fulfilled all the conditions LAFCO has given them, including get an agreement with the city, the Farm Bureau, the soil resources, a whole bunch of them. Johnny wants some water. A couple of the members talked about pushing it off to the November ballot, because what we really want to see happen is see if we can't get Granada and Montera to consolidate and eliminate one agency. So to that end, I suggested that we create a subcommittee at LAFCO, probably myself and Don Horsley, to meet with two of their members, Montera, Granada, periodically and find out what it's going to take to make that happen. I'm not saying it's going to be an easy thing, but I'd like to sit there face to face and find out what their issues would be. So understanding all of that, the commission still felt it was okay to let them go to the June ballot, assuming that all the conditions are fulfilled, including our condition. Even if we approve our condition, they still have to get voter approval, which nobody can guarantee that. And in the meantime, assuming we approve this, they get voter approval, the LAFCO subcommittee is going to continue to press for the consolidation. And our goal is to bring the two agencies back in front of LAFCO, probably either quarterly or semi-annually, and talk about the progress. So I can't make any guarantees, but I think Don and I are looking forward to holding their feet to the fire.
So when Mr. Duffy was here presenting to us about the community, the Parks and Rec District, doing a Park and Rec District, he was very specifically unspecific about what that entailed, and it was weird. And it was sort of like, well, we got to get it set up first, and then you'll see what it is. And I even passed it on to some folks on the sewer authority. They said, yeah, it was really odd. That he couldn't articulate, an ambition or an idea or a goal. And I was really confused by that. Did it? I mean, Ellen, you've talked to them more. Did they get anywhere with that, or where are they standing on that? And now, by the way, you seem to be representing them.
Part of the issue is because they're not a community service district yet, they're still a sewer and sanitary agency. They say they're having a hard time discussing Parks and Rec because they're not there yet. And I do have to believe that if in fact it gets approved, the voters approve it, and it's blessed, I do think they'll then sit down and have a section on their agenda to talk Parks and Rec. What do they want to acquire? How much are they willing to spend? What do they want to accomplish? Do they want a volleyball court? Do they want softball? And I think the other missing part is we need to get the county nailed down of how is the county going to interact. Are they going to give any kind of funding to Granada? That hasn't been finalized yet. But at the end of the day, and the reason I voted to go along with this, is I do think They will make progress. I do think their intentions are good. And I think we've all talked about this. The more broad the district is, as opposed to just sewer and sanitary, if they add Parks and Rec, I think it'll bring more people out of the woodwork to want to be part of this district, to be on the board, and to maybe make some things happen. There's lots of kids, lots of family with kids there. I think it'll be a good thing for them. Even better if we can consolidate the two districts north of us and begin to eliminate some of the agencies on the coast.
Thank you for that explanation. Any other comments? Otherwise, we could move forward. This is a very important letter, I believe, too.
I have a question.
Yes.
We're going to get $37,000 back annually to approve that they can be a park and rec district. No, we're not approving it can be a park and rec district. They'll go do their own thing, but we get $37,000 back because for some reason they've been taking our funds. Okay.
So where I landed, if you care to know, is let's give it to the voters and let them vote. Yep. So I move to approve a park and recreation funding agreement with Granada Sanitary District.
Okay, I'll say second.
That was kind of like a Miller Lite commercial. It was a second light here. So roll call vote, please.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Yes, those two females are a pretty light vote there on that one. Strike it from the record. Anyway, we move on to the next item, and I did some research quickly on this animal control world, and I understand that the state of Michigan for many, many years had dog catchers. So I'm trying to figure out if Councilmember Kowalczyk could kind of be like honorary animal control guy from the council.
Give me a net.
So we'll let staff make a brief presentation on this, and I did get a call today from Mayor Lee? No, I'm sorry.
No, Lee from
Millbrae.
From Millbrae.
Yeah. Regarding a little bit of this, and then Council of Cities.
Okay.
Yep. I think ABAG. Sorry about that. It's off the agenda item here. Sorry. Okay, go for it, my friend.
All right. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. The item before you this evening is a proposed draft letter to the San Mateo County is a letter regarding the San Mateo County Animal Control Services Contract Conditions Letter. The city currently contracts with the county for animal control services, and the county then contracts with the Peninsula Humane Society, PHS, for animal control services. For the 2013-2014 fiscal year, the city will pay $163,000 for animal control services. The animal control services contract is set to expire in June of 2015. In anticipation of the contract expiration, the county is gearing up to begin the process of negotiating a new animal control services contract. Council members heard a presentation from County Animal Control Manager Pam Machado at the Council of Cities meeting on November 22nd, which highlighted suggested negotiation points. Building off those suggested negotiation points and adding additional conditions, a council member requested city staff to draft a letter to the mayors of all 20 cities in San Mateo County and to each San Mateo County supervisor, urging them to make contact with the county animal control services with the city's suggested contract conditions. Just as a note, the letter has since been revised from the original draft staff report letter that was in your agenda packet this evening due to additional input from a council member. Please see the revised letter in front of you guys this evening. The conditions requested in the letter are as follows. Acquire and compare multiple proposals for providing animal control services in San Mateo County. Require accountability through performance measures that the contractor will report back semi-annually to counties and cities. Conduct an annual financial audit performed by a neutral third-party auditing firm. Require city and county representation on animal control contractors' board of directors. There's currently none. Require a contract termination clause whereby a city may terminate its animal control services contract upon providing notice of termination 90 days in advance. Limit the initial term of the contract to 5 years. establish transparent monthly statistical reporting, and require animal licensing revenue be placed in collection buckets for each individual city to benefit from licensing compliance within its own jurisdiction. This concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, and thanks, Rick, for handling this. And I just this evening gave Rick, Councilmember Kowalczyk, a comment by Bernie's Mountain Dog officially has her license to run around town now, but it's taken 8 months to get it clarified. And my wife worked very hard with that organization to get 8 months for Miss Clara to be able to be officially legal resident of Half Moon Bay. And when she talked to the folks in Texas a number of times, they represent 55 municipalities in this process for bill collecting. So it was kind of fascinating. And my wife was kind of confused on the dog's sex was an S, and she couldn't figure out what the hell an S was, but that's spayed. So thank you for that,
well,
both of you.
Mayor Mueller, I just wanted to thank you for being part of the 16% of residents here in Half Moon Bay that are licensing their dogs here in the city. Thank you.
So we can bring her in City Hall now?
We're doing better than San Mateo County average of 10%, so.
Or get a plaque like Andrini?
So if I can add on to the fine staff report. So I did make some changes, and then I was actually happy to see Lee Violet here tonight, because it was our work, the very handsome Lee Violet, it was our work with Lee Violet for law enforcement that sort of triggered my intent behind drafting this letter, which was he actively sought out good options. He actively led a process through with our city leadership to do proposals and then negotiate what ended up being an excellent situation for the city of Half Moon Bay for law enforcement. So I was sort of inspired by that. And the other thing that triggered this was, I think everybody was present in Atherton. I think we're all there. The reaction, so the presentation about animal control, the reaction was like, yeah, we got to do something. Everybody, not just us five, but the impression across the room of all the represented cities was, we should do something. And then I thought, well, if we walk away, I was like, yeah, we should. And then, I think that's us, right? So, and so I sort of triggered this. And you recognize all but one of these bullet points. Because there was a slide presentation, and the presentation came across a little bit like this. Gosh, well, maybe these are some things we might possibly consider maybe. And I sort of took that as like, no, any agreement we sign should have all of these absolutely. Thus why I asked Alex to craft a letter and put them in there. And then I added the first bullet point, which is to seek out our best options, including was it PHS? Including PHS and potentially others in this process, and take a broad view. And so that's how we got here, and that's my suggestion. The only other thing I'll offer to consider, that I think the revised letter is good, really good, because Alex drove it, but the only other thing we may want to consider is to change it to write our letter to Pam from this city, and then share that with the other cities and say, we encourage you to follow this as an example. It's the only other thing I might do differently, but I think this, I like either one of those. So anyway, that's why I brought it up, and I triggered that it was my final act as the outgoing mayor. Thank you very much.
And just along the area of this, and thank you for continuing on with this, I think we need to let the county know. I mean, we've talked about splitting up each city. If they've gone out and people have licensed their dogs, that money should go back to the city. Well, what's interesting there, that took 8 months for a resident to get their dog licensed. So the company who's doing that either has a big problem, and we need to let the county know. It's, again, I think part and parcel with some of this, not that you have to add it to this letter, but maybe we can have something come back and let them know that if we're going to have people license their dogs, they want to do it, you send a check, but it takes 8 months to do it, then why do it? And why have we outsourced a company to do it in another state? And maybe the county could be doing that better themselves. So again, another thing, should the county really be doing all of this themselves? Just a comment, thank you.
Alan made a great comment in our meeting that the actual board should have the equal amount of representations from the city as their board. I mean, they're going to be 15 to 1 to 1. I mean, not even county. I mean, because if it's just one representative from the city and they have 15 on their board, and I don't even know if the county supervisors are going to be on the board. So it's still going to be unbalanced. So I think the point of being a balanced representation should really be a point that we need to make. Otherwise, when we get on that board, we're going to be overwhelmed by their board. We're not going to get much say.
I think that's a great point. So in fact, It
says we need to get one, and and we don't have any. I don't even know how many are on their board. I know they have a big board.
It actually refers to PHS, and I think it should not refer to PHS. I think it should say equal representation by the cities on the governing board of the organization that manages animal control. I'm not making any presumptions. It's PHS. There's some entity that's going to manage animal control, and they're going to have a board, and that entity should have representation from the city.
So it looks like we have a little bit of a redraft. Is that?
I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but I thought that was a great point Ellen made it, in that we probably will be lucky we get one, but we should ask for the moon.
So we have to bring it back, or we can vote on it and then make the.
No, you could direct that it be modified and sent out consistent with your direction. So I would just request that you be clear about the modifications that you want, and then we can polish it up and prepare it for your signature.
And may I provide a clarifying example to make sure we understand the direction. So if you modify it for this concept that there would be an equal number of local government representatives on the board to the rest of the board members, let's pretend we're talking about Sunrisus, the local nonprofit here, and let's pretend the city was contributing funds or something. You would be saying that the city would have a right to half of those board members, and only half of the board members would come from all the different groups that you try and get to represent a board. You usually need legal support, you usually need somebody from the fundraising world, you usually need somebody from the marketing world, you usually need some pretty big donors on the board, that kind of thing. So I just want to clarify that that is indeed what you would be trying to negotiate for.
I think what I'm trying to see is if there's a way that they could have, because I don't know whether the whole board should be doing the animal control portion of it, because they do a lot of other stuff. So what I'm saying is the animal portion control, they could assign 4 people from their board or 4 people from our board and 1 or whatever for because the soups can't have that many. So, but I think it should be balanced. And I'm talking about the animal control portion. I don't care about their fundraising and all that other kind of thing, but I think it's important that we have an equal say if we endow.
So have a separate subcommittee then, just for the animal control services, where it would meet quarterly or something like that?
So we're only contracting for animal control.
That is correct.
And whatever entity takes it on is the only entity I'm concerned with at this. Yeah.
Except that right now it is PHS and they are an organization that does a whole array of services. One of those services is animal control. So that board currently touches everything. I think maybe what you're suggesting, if you're interested in modifying it, as Councilmember Patrick is talking about, would be to break out some sort of oversight group that would then have equal representation.
That's really what it says right now. It says require city and county representation on the animal, are you done? Yeah. On the animal control contractor board of directors, currently none. So it doesn't exist right now. So I think what we're saying is, hey, look, we're giving you how much? 5 million?
6 million.
$6 million. We want an, whatever you want to call it, oversight board. You put on some of your people, we're going to put on some of our people, and we're going to monitor what you do with our $6 million. We'd be creating a new board, and that to me is what it says right here. To get on them with 14 other people, you're right, they do other things.
I don't want to get on that board.
Let me throw one more thing out real quick. What was our share, 133?
$163,000.
160? Here, one concern I've got, the entire city of Half Moon Bay is paying $160,000 for animal control services. I just had this funny feeling, if half the people in town own dogs, those are the people that should be paying the 160. I don't think cats are a big deal. I don't think they go run around biting people. But clearly, when you hear most of the issues, aggressive dog bites, dogs loose, wild boars occasionally, I'd love to see cost allocation back to the animal owners as opposed to the entire community. I'm just going to throw it out there. I don't want to muddy the waters. The letter's great. This is what we need to get started with.
I mean, we had two visitors stop by this afternoon, a world of interruption like we all go through. And they had dogs and they weren't registered because Ada just got this thing this afternoon. I mean, nobody's dogs are registered. I mean, look at our percentage. I mean, and trust me, there's a dog in almost every household around here, a dog or a cat. Everybody's got one. Not Naomi's, but you got 4,000 cats and raccoons, so we don't classify them in there. So anyway, are we able to clarify this
I think so.
letter with staff to understand where
I think
this
so.
council wants to go with it?
Let me float this, and then I'm going to make a two-part motion. One part is regarding this letter. The second part is that we, in fact, send a letter to Pam Machado. Right? This is the letter going out to the mayors, and then we need to use the same verbiage, sending it to Pam Machado, saying this is our perspective. That's all right? Nods? Okay. So I move to, I'm going to move something here. Bear with me.
See, if you had it, you could read it.
I edited it. So if only I printed everything. How many trees, Naomi? How many
Approve
trees?
the proposal.
I move to approve the modified letter to fellow mayors of the 20 San Mateo County cities with modifications as discussed tonight, and including the addendum, and with the following change to bullet point 1, 2, 3, 4, which will state require equal city and county representation on the board of directors for animal control services.
Second.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, so ordered 5. And then,
sorry, if I may.
yeah, one more.
And I move that the city of Half Moon Bay produce a letter with the same facts directed to Pam Machado, stating our position regarding animal control.
Second.
Moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And just quickly, I'd like to convey to staff, Laura and Tony and Alex and Siobhan, this was a heck of a packet, you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This was probably one of the most major meetings we've had in some time. So I appreciate it, and make sure you let all the staff know that we've gone through that. And so
I want you to know, John, that my packet was 20 kilobytes larger.
yeah.
Paper free.
Do you want to say anything or no?
Mine
Okay,
was
I'll
one.
let it go here. So we're gonna ready to adjourn here.
But I think it's important that everyone should know how to do the Heimlich maneuver, not only because we're coughing up here, but John probably saved the life of one of his companion pumpkin growers earlier this week because he knew how to do the Heimlich. It was truly an incredible thing. John, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, Sunday we were with all our pals, and it was a big, potluck, and I was sitting across the table from 6'3", my buddy Vince Zanino in Palo Alto. Vince is a great guy, and I looked at him and I said, Vince, are you choking? Are you choking? And I could see him dropping down and not breathing, and so I yelled for a big guy because I thought he was going to stand up and I couldn't have reached him. And he stayed in the chair, thank God, and I just spontaneously jumped in and pop, pop, pop 3 times, and he upchucked, and my man Vince is still alive to grow a big pumpkin next year. So it can happen like that.
Saves a life.
No, I never have either, but thank God. So this time we will adjourn the meeting.